You might have to cut us off because I'm telling you this could be we could just keep going about this all day long. But look, DeLu, man, I'm happy to see you here. I'm happy to see your face again.
So good to see you, as always.
Indeed, indeed. So let's dig in, man. I think we have a lot to talk about here. Gosh, where do we even begin? Let's start with this, man. I think because this is an important one. Clearly, we have been in a crazy moment this past year, right? And before we get in the whole like diversity talk, let's talk business for a second. Like, how has your commerce strategy really evolved over the last 3 years, right? More importantly, due to this last year, that pivot that I'm sure like many of us have made that you may or may have not made. Like
Right.
curious to kind of just start there. Or even
Yeah,
before that, I apologize. Let's just go and understand what are some of and I apologize for this pivot. Let's just go through a little bit about you first, right? Like
yeah,
who you are, and then of course your brands that you guys represent.
sure. So thanks, as always, great to be here. And so I lead the marketing team at Conagra Brands, and my team includes our brand design and packaging, e-commerce, media, content, so CRM, and then working a lot on this whole digital transformation. I've been here about 4 years. And for that entire time, as you just described, we've sort of been in this, like many companies, transformation mode. We kind of knew this thing was coming, right? We were seeing our business shift because the consumers were shifting the way they were thinking about food, acquiring food, and even acquiring information and content as related to food. So we were on a journey over the last, again, 4 years. It just got accelerated by 5 to 10 years, depending on who you talk to
Yep.
in the past year. The good news is we were ready for it. We were as prepared as we would like to say we could
Yeah.
be, given the things that we didn't know that were going to happen. But I'm proud to say that our team was positioning ourselves based on what we saw emerging, and have been able to respond to it accordingly.
So let me ask then, like, what has the last year looked like for you all, right? In terms of the business, right? Like, where did you see pivots that were made? Because I feel like there's a lot. Look, everyone likes to talk about the fact that they do digital, right?
Right.
Truth is, now everyone was really forced to put that at the forefront of how they do business, how they communicate with their consumers, how they get people like to purchase and do things. So curious to know a little bit more about what you guys did throughout this year that might have been different and or unique.
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, going into this year, we were already truly digital. Our investments in our brands were already 70+% digital, even
Wow.
before this year. And that started again back nearly 4 years ago with the recognition that in a world gone digital, it's how the consumers were behaving. And so we saw an opportunity, even before this all hit, to really meet our consumers where they were. The second thing that I think was a big recognition is that there's been this convergence of retail and media and the way people consume information, right? And streaming and all these other things. So the entire funnel, we called it, of how consumers were engaged by brands and businesses has been it's not even linear anymore. It's just been disrupted. And so we were already leaning into that. So I like to say, if there's a thing called being digital, we were
Yep.
already there. And it's only accelerated more, or in better sense, has allowed us to be prepared for this sort of phenomenon. And so there's some specific things that when people say being digital, you think
Yep.
about, again, back to the consumer. It's not so much the way we think about it internally. It's about how the consumer is, again, doing all those things. We saw something very specific in food when we talk about digital, which is how they shop, how they made those decisions, and how they were acquiring the food through e-commerce just really took off. And I think it got people just to be more laser focused on that concept of digital as a total ecosystem versus that single moment in time or media or advertising. Makes sense.
Yeah, that it's interesting too, because I mean, when we think about food and these products and what we've done over the past years, like I've never shopped so much in my life for food products, more importantly, online. right? And then of course, for many of us, like I know that the beauty of this past year, at least for me, is the fact that now I never have to walk into a store again.
Right.
So I'm buying the products, I go and pull up in the parking lot, then I get that. But how you have targeted your consumers though, has that changed though? Because I know prior to the pandemic, like everyone was on this huge kick of like location-based advertising, right? And clearly, because 1.0 was like, hey, I'm walking down the street, I'm walking past this store, maybe I'll deliver them an ad for a Slim Jim to hope they walk in and buy it. Reality speaking, though, that wasn't the best way of targeting. But 2.0 was then understanding foot traffic, where they go, and then being able to determine where they're going to go next. We're all at home or a gas station or a food market. How did that change how you guys were then targeting your consumers?
Yeah, I think the reality is the consumers have been giving us those signals, and now they're more specific, right? They're searching for specific category items or attributes or needs, right? And I think what we just have is more opportunity to think differently about how we respond to them. Let me give you an example. So you see people, we used to say they would shop for brands, right? I'm looking for this brand that incorporates all these specific attributes and you know, these things. But now you see people shopping based on fitness behavior or diet behaviors, or I want these attributes. I want low sugar, or I want high protein or low carbs. It actually unlocks the potential of the entire portfolio that can meet those requirements. It's not a single brand anymore, but several. So we were just today looking at, you know, more people eating at home, more people watching TV and video at home. So we sell popcorn, right? Or Redenbacher's and Angie's Boom Chicka Pop and Act Two. So we have all these great brands that are available. And now we don't have to go to market with a single brand, but we can go to market in a category and look at whether someone's looking for a specific size, a specific form, you know, kernels that I can make at home, or microwave popcorn. We can now take a more portfolio approach to helping consumers in those categories. And that's how we've really pivoted.
That's so interesting too. So this is like a more of a lifestyle approach. So have your categories changed, or do you find yourself right now like building together more products as like, okay, this is one group, this is another?
Yeah, the category definition, we do something we call demand units, right? So we literally look at those category demand signals, and then we think which brands or which brand or brands or products within those brand platforms would be most useful for those consumers. And those are the ones that we would promote or make sure that they show up, whether it's in search or social or any forum. It allows us to promote the products that the consumers have demonstrated they're most likely to choose.
That's interesting. So let me ask you here. It's an interesting question. What do you think is the biggest threat to your commerce business right now?
Biggest threat. I would think it's our continued ability to meet that accelerated demand and the shift, right? So you mentioned you don't have to go to the store anymore. But I think the consumers, I love it, they have the choice to go or not. And it's us keeping pace with how they choose to engage with us and making sure we have the right form, the right format, the right size, the right price, all those things for a growing set of consumers who are accessing the space, but also a very diffuse and diverse group of consumers who don't all have the same means and capabilities in that space. We're going to have to make sure that we can service them all as those dynamics shift.
Interesting. So look, I understand clearly that your commerce marketing is demand based, right? So for the folks that are actually listening, would love you to just explain a little bit about how that actually works in your world.
Yeah, I think the key is again that when we talk about demand and consumers, and I think one of the most interesting things there is that we're all working with a finite set of consumers, right? There's, I think the last census said 330 million people in the US, and you know that that's about 130 30 million households that make up that universe. And since we're all competing with those groups, if we were to go with every individual brand identifying the size of audience and the potential consumers, it'd be very large, right? It'd probably exceed that population. But if we look at it from a total demand, right, the demand for a given category or a certain set of behaviors, and then think about all of our brands and products that can support that demand, we actually are starting to build our own baskets. And so that's a really different approach than saying every single brand has an infinite number of consumers that we should market to, right? So that means we would spend a lot to try to get access to what will actually inevitably be a fixed number of consumers who are actually going to participate. And so, so again, I gave the example of 3 popcorns in the same category. Each one has an opportunity to win individually, but collectively, we have an exponential impact. So we think of that as a demand category. Maybe it's salty snacks, maybe it's popcorn as a subcategory in salty snacks, rather than thinking of it as a specific category for a brand that has only 1 or 2 attributes.
That's really interesting. That's, yeah, makes sense. So here's a question then. What, in doing so, right, what are some of the tools or even technologies that you guys are actually using to deploy to essentially help with some of your commerce evolution, I'll say?
I'd say the biggest technology are the people.
Hey.
And I think the biggest thing we had to do is adjust our practices with how our people interact with that category and demand. And it's really specific around how we've organized. We organize instead of around, again, as individual brands, we've organized around those demand spaces, which allows our teams to have cross-brand and cross-product, cross-platform intimacy with the consumers as they work in that space. So that's one. So as we established those practices, we were able to leverage technology and tools, whether it's retail data platforms or other data platforms, social platforms, or again, consumer insight platforms that would allow us to see or identify that demand at scale. Again, not platform specific in every case, sometimes it was. But then our teams had to leverage those technologies to support that practice. Does it make sense?
Yep,
so,
absolutely.
And again, it's sort of very purposeful. We also have, audience-based platforms and identifiers that we do versus our internal, that are built on our internal systems, as well as connecting those to the external platforms. But very consumer focused and really being behavioral so we can respond to what they're looking for, not a pre-planned sort of segmentation or view that's based on historical behavior.
Gotcha. DeLu, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, man.
Yeah.
What would you say in this past year, what would you say was the work that you feel the proudest of that you guys basically brought out to market with?
Yeah. I'd say it's the work that we've done with Slim Jim.
I love Slim Jims, by the way, man.
Okay.
I think I'm running low on my supply here. I need to get a hookup on these.
Okay, we'll talk about that. So I think that's a great example of a brand that had historically been one of our big broadcast spenders, had an emerging digital presence, but was never fully encapsulated this idea of sort of audience building, community building, and really understanding and leaning into the cultural currency of that brand. So if you look, we grew our Instagram, followers in a couple of years from a few thousand to over 1 million, right? And it was all just built on watching how the community engages, how they love the brand and what they love about the brand. And it wasn't always about the product. It was about how it fit into their lifestyle and their culture. And then you may have seen recently, we did something with, we won the Ad Week Adness, March Adness around that community and culture. It's the community and the stickiness of that community that has really helped propel that brand into another level. And we didn't use traditional, what some people call traditional marketing methodology. We had a big presence in digital. We had a big presence online and in social. And so I think that it's really great to see those brands emerge, not as single case studies, but as long-term success stories of building something that's lasting. And we continue to build on that. You'll see more and more coming on how that community and how that brand continues to accelerate. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't really focus on the fact that we were also doing lots of great innovation around the product. And so as we're innovating and engaging with that audience and bringing those things together and with our commerce, it starts to demonstrate, what we're here to talk about is what does the future of commerce look like? Where social commerce and all of those things start to converge. Those are going to be capabilities and ways of working that most organizations are going to want to think about.
Well, I'd love to sit on something you just said a minute ago. You talked about the growth in your Instagram. You went from few thousand to like million plus. I think that a lot of people look at today in terms of how they engage with consumers and get a little confused with where they should be, right? And so you hit on like community, and community is really big, right? Like when you have community and individuals talking about a particular thing and or product, right? Social validation, right? Kicks in. Right. It's like if I share something, someone else will go and get it, et cetera. Have you all found, and this is with any one of your products, have you all found success in a specific platform, whether it be TikTok, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, so on and so forth, Clubhouse? Like, has there been like a go-to? Just curious.
I think it's varied. I mean, the big ones have demonstrated the ability to deliver audiences at scale. No, sorry, let me take it back. Communities at scale.
Yep.
Because it's where the people are operating. So I think, and we've always done something, like everyone else, we do a cultural currency mapping. We try to figure out which of these brands actually have a conversation that's in place. And so then we decide, right, some brands try to create their own conversations. That's often difficult. You can join them, or you can kind of, put your branding or your presence into those conversations and start to create certain narratives. And I think we found that wherever we can probably joining those conversations and leaning into what the community is already talking about, we've been most successful there. You'll see them emerging on other brands like Duncan Hines. Baking's a big deal. We launched some products called Epic, which is how people, like to make these gooey, specialty, great desserts. You start to see that audience and community growing, because we're leaning into a behavior that's already happening and that people are really, as I said, we were meeting before, everyone loves cake, right? So if you lean into that and think about all the different ways people are leveraging something that is familiar and fun and exciting, if you do that well, the audience will engage with you, right? Authentic engagement with a product that does a job that people can relate to. So, and that's not platform specific, but we are specific about which platforms we find that behavior most compelling.
That's actually really great that you said that, because relevancy is key. Sometimes it's about joining in the conversation, not necessarily trying to spark an entirely new one. So that's a great bit of information there. So when we talk about this year that we've been into and thrusted into, right, and this pivot in terms of digital, you mentioned 3 or 4 times authenticity came up when you were speaking. And now we're a subtle pivot here, or we'll call it a subtle pivot at least. Authenticity really matters now with brands, right? So we came to a point where, Ahmad was murdered. A lot of brands, a lot of companies stood up and they posted a black square in their Instagram account. They, said they're going to donate a lot of money. They said they're going to, all this transformative kind of stuff evolving around diversity and inclusion. What did that moment look like for your brand, right? And I mean, clearly a gigantic commerce brand, right? So what does that look like for your organization and what you guys try to do to navigate through those times, and even currently to this moment we're in now?
Yeah, clearly, from a company like everyone else, those events had a profound impact on the organization, and every individual, top to bottom. We had a lot of discussions about things we could do, and obviously we have 100 brands and 8,000 products, many that service affected communities, and so we've worked, in a lot of ways to think about how we could have impact there. But I would say that what we found, number one, is we worked with partners like you guys and your leadership team to think about what we could do together to have an impact. And as you know, there's going to be more happening there.
Absolutely.
And I think where we had the most impact was we realized that the individuals in our organization could have impact in communities. So while our brands got active and we try to make sure that our brands are, communicating appropriately, that we had contextually relevant content, any content that we have that was insensitive, whether it was pointed out or not, we were much more conscious of that.
Yep.
We included partners that had more view into diverse communities that we may not have had inside the organization to make sure the content we produced was relevant and credible. We added more diversity into our user-generated content and social activities and chefs and culinary teams and cuisine, so we can make sure that that was more visible. You know, even like brands like Gardein, where we did work with more diverse chefs to make sure that that was representative. And then the thing I've been most proud of is our team worked with programs like Social Works and After School Matters, where we actually had teams doing, and we have an ongoing internship right now with, you know, future high school graduates, where we're talking to them about careers in companies like ours. And we had them work on projects, something that went live in commerce. We made a baking kit for the holidays that was designed by graduates from that program, and we paid them.
Nice.
We didn't ask them to do it as an internship and a feel good to say they got experience. We actually paid them market value for their designs.
Good.
And
Good
that's
for you
really
guys.
important, because we talk a lot about that, right? We do internships, we do scholarships, we do programs, but you and I have talked a lot about this. It's about creating sustainable career paths and financial equity. And that's where I think companies are going to have a lot of impact. And I'm proud to say that my team has been doing that, and doing it individually, because each of us can have impacts that will and leverage our company's tremendous resources. And they've been very supportive in this, in helping us create a more sustainable through line. Does that make sense? So
absolutely. And you yeah, it's super. It is. It's very important. And one thing you hit on too is it paid, right? Because of this, right now, a lot of help is coming, but people are saying, well, you can do it for free, right? And a lot of times, like, we or people of color can't afford to go to these internships and work for free, can't afford to go travel across the country and get a room or something. Like, it's just, it's impossible. It's difficult. So I applaud you guys for doing that work. So here's another question, and along the same lines. So clearly you guys are doing a lot of work. Clearly you're investing a lot in the community and whatnot. But what should other brands be focusing on right now to actually get it right? Because I think that when we talk about doing the work and being authentic, there is this fear of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. And then if there's a fear of not saying the wrong thing or not showing up, then it essentially is, again, you don't show up. And then it looks like, well, you're not saying anything because you don't care. So for any individuals that are watching, whether it be executive leaderships or not, like, how do we allow for them to understand the importance of speaking up and showing support in a positive manner?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I just add representative folks to help answer the question or be part of the narrative in the debate. I still find a lot of organizations are trying to guess, or they'll ask one person or two people for an opinion, but then fail to include those broader groups in the ongoing conversations and the evolving discussions about what to say, where to say it, or what to do. And I think that comes back to representation, right? So that's important. I know you've done a lot of work on getting more people into the room and a seat at the table. That table has to be permanent, not transactional. Hey, I have a problem right now, so I'm going to bring someone in just to answer this question. It has to become an embedded part of how we operate every day, because it's not a one-time thing, it's an all-the-time thing. So that's super important. And I think that's the most tactical, short-term advice I could give to anyone. And a longer term, I think I've found that there's a lot of ambition and a lot of energy inside organizations. And I think they're all, every step's a positive step if we can make progress. And I think all of us are lacking an operating system to allow us to connect to a universe that many people don't understand, or they do things, right? Everyone's launching a program here, a college scholarship, a connection with this HBCU and with that one. But it's not what we do on a daily basis, right? We're a food manufacturer that makes good food that's healthy for people, and we're good marketers and digital people and those things. I think there's this realization that we have to figure out how we use what we're good at to make impacts in those communities. And I'm not sure there's an operating system just yet to connect those dots. Does that make sense? So we're all
Absolutely
running
does.
around doing things that we're excited about, or we read about and we heard about, but it's not things that we're as professional and proficient at. And I think there's so many things we do really well that could have impacts. If we were to focus it there, I think we could have outsized impact in a much shorter time frame.
So you and I, we had a conversation recently, and I know that you had talked about that impact, right? And what that impact looks like in the community. And then, the conversation pivoted and we were talking about um, the impact that brands overall have on this world, on each community, and why it's so important for them to actually step up and actually do the right thing right now. We talked about proper ways of eating,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, and there's so much we could do to advocate for people by even sharing the right insights and information. Could you, I don't want to give too much up here, but like, could you go deep on that one, man? Because I think that's a
Yeah,
really important one.
it comes back to what we do, right? There's so many big food companies that are in every pantry in a lot of these communities that we talk about. And we were talking about the potential of collaboration with some of these community organizations rather than us trying to go to them individually into those communities. And I called it out DEI each other. What if we were to collaborate and start building platforms that were targeted on these communities? Again, healthy eating, which affects health, which affects financial uh, debt in many of these communities, right? That there's a high cost of poor health and poor eating. Are there ways for us to create better outcomes for those communities with, or food deserts or all these things? Again, we were talking about all these potential things that would take a collective effort, but there are community organizations working to do these things, but often don't have the funding or the people or the technical knowledge to deliver some of those things. There's just an opportunity for, more organizations to come together and assist with those. So, I think those are types of things, but they're targeted for specific outcomes. It's not just about doing the activity. That one was a group I was talking to, was looking for the root cause of some of the financial inequity and thinking along that value chain, saying, how could these different expert organizations and companies contribute to that value chain becoming more sustainable and impactful?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's another one then. We also talk about the work, the output of the work, right, that comes out today. And as a organization like yours, I mean, clearly you guys have some brand. Your brand is essentially in every individual's home, right? In the US, if not the world, I'd say, right? So with that being said, how you market to your audience really matters, right? And then we're talking on authenticity too, and of course being in the moment. So how has that looked for your brands, right? Like what has been the approach you guys have taken to actually ensuring that the message you're bringing out to folks is the right one, and that you're not slipping up and saying and or doing the wrong thing?
Yeah. Yeah. As I said, our team has made sure that we increase representation in the conversation, and we have honest discussion about those risk factors or impact points.
Yep.
And probably more than ever, people have been more willing to speak up when they see something that could be detrimental or risky. And more and more people have been willing to pivot as a result, right? In some cases, historically, we may have said, that's just a small voice. It's not really an issue. We might see it, but don't worry about it, because the broader implications outweigh that risk. I think people are taking it more seriously than ever. And I said, and more importantly, the teams feel more comfortable bringing it at a level that I'd never seen before, right? They almost feel it's our responsibility to make sure we don't continue to perpetuate these types of negative impacts, right? The detractors that may have been overlooked before. People don't let those, or they try to avoid letting those slip through anymore. And I'm really proud of the whole organization and everyone who's willing to step in and say, it's not a matter if it's my role or if it crossed my desk or not. If I can be of assistance here and have a positive impact, then I'll weigh in.
Absolutely.
And that's really important.
Love that. I'm gonna ask one more on this side, then we're gonna pivot back to the business a bit.
Okay.
So my question would be this then. There are very few people that look like you and I that are in senior leadership positions on the brand side, on the agency side as well. Because of this, we find individuals like you and myself who will often speak out and say the uncomfortable thing at times, right? So what is it that we do, or what is it that we can tell other folks in terms of, the importance of ensuring that there's a diverse set of individuals at the table as key leaders, as decision makers, more importantly, as C-suite executives?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot in that the impact of having diverse voices and perspectives, whether, and I don't like to use the fear of mistake avoidance. It looks at unlocking all of these great ideas and insights and potential through lived experiences, through shared experiences, or by creating a broader set of understanding, right? It's impossible to create that if the representation's not there. It's just impossible. And that the markets and the earning potential for our businesses that we come up with every day that we have representation is exponentially large, right? These communities are accessible, but they do require different contexts at times. We miss opportunities just because we don't know, and we don't have any, even sometimes know to ask the question. So when businesses think about growing and broadening their impact, we're going to need to access these communities in a contextually relevant way. And so I think you're going to have leadership that is brave, and leadership that is representative in the sense that they can help the organizations invest in the right things to access the economic power there.
Absolutely. And I would end that with also saying it like, there is plenty of Black and brown talent out there. I think that brands and companies, we need to be smarter around how we access and find that talent, because I promise you, they live in more places than just the HBCU campuses, right? And then it's also about training up as well, right? It's like these individuals that are in these companies, like we should figure about like mentorship opportunities. We should figure out opportunities to help train, to ensure that they're able to move on and continue, up that ladder. Because that visibility within the organizations is super critical. It's important when we see other people that look like us at the top, because that shows that there is a path and this is a place that I am welcome in.
Yeah, and I would put this one back on you and maybe share a little bit about what you do in terms of making time. Because it's not just inside of our companies because of the limited numbers you just described. It's that in order to increase inside of our companies, we have to continue to mentor and work with people outside of our companies and build skills and build awareness. I mean, you shared some great stuff with me that you do in terms of just making time,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few things I'll say, right? One is just mentorship, right? So I mentor, 5+ people a week, random people I do not even know, but who need help. I think it's important. I've been in this space of advertising for 21 years. I didn't have a mentor that looked like me until about 9-10 months ago, right? And that's kind of crazy, right? So it's also for these other individuals that are non-people of color on this call as well, like the importance of allyship, right? Like having someone who sits, like I'm fortunate to be where I am, but I also know that I've gotten help from a handful of people, 4 people specifically, bosses of mine who did not look like me, right? But they understood my talent and took me along the way with them. But let's pivot for a hot second too now. I want to pivot back to something that I think would be interesting to hear from you. Through this COVID era, we'll call it, right? What is there anything specifically that you think that you would have done differently now if you were to go back and look at what you learned over the past year? Perhaps something that might have allowed you to ramp up quicker, something that allowed you to generate more dollars, something like, curious to know what that might be.
I would say that I was pretty proud of where we are and how we got there. What I probably would have was had more people that were closer to some of these dynamics. Let's say we had a team of 20 who were really well versed in this and super kind of on it because they knew this was important and it was going to be the future. I would have loved to have more people spending more time on it. Right. But it was a matter of size and scale, right? I can look back now and say, wow, if I knew it was going to be 3 or 4 times what it was then, I would have had more people who were much closer to it so that as things continue to change, we could continue to scale. But I feel like we were in pretty good position based on where it was. That would be my only thing. I think the people part's so important.
Yeah.
And the more people we can engage and have prepared for these emerging dynamics, I think every organization's stronger as a result.
I'm curious, and you don't have to answer this, but like, did you identify, were there any prompts or like things where you're like, wow, we totally screwed this up, we shouldn't have done that then? I don't again, I want to put you on the spot
Yeah.
here.
No,
But
I think it probably comes down to like everyone else's. There were products that the demand accelerated, and we wish we had more of them, and we had to shift some of our favorites, some of our favorite flavors that started to fly off the shelves and off the digital shelf. So if we had more of them, that would have been great, right? So there are a few of those out there. Again, Slim Jim is one of them. I mean, I wish we had more of them than every day,
wait,
and
are you
more
are you
flavors
saying
because
that this
people
are you
really
saying that
enjoy them.
this are you saying there's a shortage of Slim Jims? This might become a problem now. We don't
No,
want to go viral here.
as I said, I wish if I'd have known back then that
Yeah.
it was going to be as explosive in terms of community engagement and the demand was going to be this high. I'd always wish I had more of those things that people are in super high demand, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
So look, we're talking about the future of commerce. I'm curious to know, like, when I envision what this space looks like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, I envision a space where clearly we're gonna, mobile devices will be gone. Will be some form of wearable, right? Like whether it be a glass or who knows, a contact at some point in time. But I almost look at it as, and I'll start with this white paper I did a while ago, that we found out that basically consumers expect you to know them better than they know themselves. In an era now where like, iOS is updating and lacking like third-party technology or third-party tracking now. What does the future look like in terms of how we engage consumers? Because my thought is that eventually we're going to be getting recommendations for things before we even need to ask for it, right?
Mhm. Well, I think it's that. I think one is the consumers have been giving us a lot of those signals for a long time. I just don't know if we've been hearing them. We've been listening. I don't know if we've been hearing them.
Yep.
So they're going to expect us to answer the question 10 years from now, just like before. Like you said, some of them may expect us to anticipate the answer even before. And I think in certain contexts, that'll be true. Food, I'm sure they're going to expect us to have the right ingredients and the things that make people, have the best outcomes and results. They'll expect that from us, and we'll have to stay on top of that. And then what happens after 3 to 5 years, I don't know, and it probably won't matter, because if I could have thought about what's happening now 3 to 5 years ago, right? How much of this could we have anticipated? The rate and pace of change is so high now.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think what we're all going to be accountable for is being responsive, right? Being prepared to pivot and adjust. And we call it be better than yesterday.
Mhm.
You're going to have to, because the expectations of what that means are going to be exponential each day to the next day. And we're going to have to be ready for that.
Yeah. So here's another one too. When we start to talk about the future of commerce as well, like I would assume that wearables will play a significant role, right? Because now we're talking about health, right?
Yeah.
So we're able to get so much information now. It's like now you have doctor appointments that are happening like this. There will be a time where we can get treated sitting in our own houses, right? By wearing some of these devices. I'm curious to know, have you guys as a brand thought about what that looks like or invested any time in what that looks like and how you then communicate the right products by an understanding of their health?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a brand called Healthy Choice. So obviously we're looking at those consumer health trends and diet trends and wellness and, avoidance. All of those things are a constant driver of demand.
Yeah.
And so it's important. It's vitally important that we understand the impacts to the consumers of things like that. So
Right.
I know you work in the health space, and
Yep.
I think all food brands are technically in the health space, right? So
Yeah.
super
True.
important. It's something we discuss on a consistent basis as a critical thing. Again, how we communicate, what we communicate, even what we were talking about earlier about the impact of communities on it's what we do. So
Absolutely. So look, you have a significant amount of refrigerated and frozen portfolio, right? Like, so you do. So how long do you think it's going to take until frozen commerce now catches up with ambient?
I think it's going to be a matter of how much of the population that we can access with the distribution network. Now, you're seeing a lot of emerging platforms that are solving for that, right? Ultimate convenience and shortening the delivery time so that refrigeration and cold management are not issues. I don't think we're that far away. I think their networks, their capabilities, and consumer demand is increasing, as you described your own experience, where you want to some order from home and have it show up. We're seeing new distribution models. We're seeing new partners step into that space. So I don't think we're far away. And I think it's something that everyone should be prepared for. One, the consumer expectation is continuing to grow. Yep. And, there's going to be a lot of opportunity there for us to meet that demand.
Absolutely. So hey, I know we have a couple minutes left, so I want to actually I want to ask a fun question as well. Like, how in the world did that Donny Osmond and Lil Yachty collaboration come about for the Chef Boyardee? Like, please share. We want to know how this happened.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. We found some, in social listening, you find some fans you wouldn't expect that love a product or a brand who really wanted to celebrate it. And that was a collaboration that said, wow, you're a fan. And then they actually got together and said, this would be fun. And just really thought, like, what would this look like? What's the art of the possible here? And then we let them be creative. And that's a great example of pure creativity. And you sit back and you go, wow, that's awesome, right?
Wait, can you, for the folks who might not have seen it, can you just give a really quick brief, like what it was? Because it's pretty amazing.
It's essentially a music video on Chef Boyardee when we launched, some new products, and then Yachty and Donnie made a video and celebrating that product and how much they really liked it. So,
well, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you in the next shoot of that.
Probably not. I'm going to just keep doing my marketing work here in my office. And I'll let the experts do the creativity.
Well, look, I'm going to just add, we're going to end with one last question here, just because I think it's an important one. For any folks that are watching right now, what last advice would you give them on really growing their commerce business, given the time that we're in right now as of today?
Yeah, I think everyone in the commerce space, regardless of role, are going to have to understand these emerging trends around social commerce and a lot of what entrepreneurial brands are doing to really create a presence that's different than how we operate in sort of what I call large organizations. I mean, we're seeing new and creative and innovative ways to reach consumers, from live streaming and people connecting and influencers and direct buys off of some of these platforms. I think they're fundamentally changing the nature of commerce, right? We have direct to consumer, we have B2B2C, we have home shipment, we have home delivery, and that's just now, right? As you just described, all the different things we're seeing emerge. So I think everyone participating, from what we call brand or sales to marketing, all of that's converging. And we're going to have to understand how consumers are making these decisions and accessing these products. And it's all just sort of converging at an accelerated rate.
Amazing. This is dope, man. This is dope. I guess one last question that actually came through was, are there any predictions for the next few years in commerce space when it actually comes to emerging tech?
Emerging tech. Yeah, I think it's going to be around delivery and consumer access, as you just said. As we think about the consumer choice of going in or getting it to home, what's happening in the home and home-based tech is really going to be, I think, redefining for us, right? We're calling it the living room. It's the TV, it's the mobile device, it's the smart speakers, it's the home and tech around the consumer's concept of home, I think, is going to be defining when it comes to our space.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm sorry, man. They're coming through. I'm just going to ask another one real quick that just came through, which was, what has been your favorite marketing campaign to work on throughout your career?
Throughout my career. Wow,
But
that's
it
a
only has,
tough one.
but it has to be one only with VMLY&R. No, no.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You know, I've worked on a lot of great brands, so I think it would be a disservice to call out so many, right? So I worked on some great stuff when we were at in automotive for many years, and I'm proud of what my team does here. So I don't know. It's hard for me to point to any one specific execution. So,
Oh, here's a
and I don't want,
here's a
I'm being politically correct
no,
because
no.
I
I
have so
get that.
many
I get
great
that.
brands in my portfolio and I have so much work that I'm proud of in those organizations. I don't want to call one specific.
So, so I get that, but let me ask this one then.
Okay.
Has there been a brand, maybe not one that you worked on, but a brand that you over the past few years have really idolized and thought like, wow, these guys are getting it right.
Yeah.
And I'm really loving the work that they're actually doing.
Yeah, it's one that I worked at, and I will call out because I have lots of friends there, and it was Subaru car brand. Not everyone knows that it was a pretty small brand back when we were there, but it's, you know, quadrupled or more of a 5x increase in its sales. And what I love about that brand is it really leaned into what people loved about it, and built around it and celebrated it. And they truly celebrated their consumers. And they have outsized retention and repurchase rates and all these positive attributes. But their consumers were at the core of what they did. And I think it's a true testament to understanding them, again, leaning into that and then celebrating that every way possible. I think it's a great case study for, you know, long-term strength. So.
Absolutely. Well, look, man, you, as always, DeLu, have been incredible. I personally appreciate your time, and I know everyone else here does as well, for you to come on and talk about what you do. So thank you, man. This has been dope.
All right. Great to see you.
Can we do this in person at some point with maybe like a drink in hand too?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, stay
I would
tuned.
look forward to that.
We're working on some stuff. Yeah, stay tuned there. Trying to get people back together. But yeah,
Nice,
until
love it.
then, seriously, thank you so much for both being here, and hope you'll consider